Yeah, well, I think the timing is really good to be having this conversation. I know a lot of the SKO motion is in place. We're getting the events scheduled, we're getting things teed up. But today, I really appreciate our focusing in and diving in a little bit more detail on, kind of what happens before, during, and after, maybe most importantly, with an SKO. And it's an area that maybe gets missed when we're thinking about logistics and happy hour and entertainment and all those other factors that need to come into play. So let's dive into it. And Sam, by way of an agenda, we'll keep this pretty high level, but want to spend a little bit of time, just talking about why is an SKO important? Maybe more so now than ever. Heading into 2024, what are we seeing? I'll share a little bit of research that SBI has done around what we're looking at heading into next year. And then with that as a backdrop, introduce this concept of the blended experience and why we think that's a great way to think about SKO and how we can maximize that. And then Sam, I'm really looking forward to having you share, some examples and case studies about how this blended SKO can work and some of the benefits that come out of that. So I guess any other thoughts on the agenda or high points you want to cover before we jump in here?
I mean, just in our preparatory conversations, right? Just a reflection that we ran a similar webinar a few years ago, and the circumstances were very different. And we were in the middle of COVID, and it was how you got to align your sales team and get everybody pointed to true north. But how are you going to do that when everybody's at home? And today, that's not the reality. But we're in a different situation. So just thinking about, I've just been reflecting on context and how that affects design, but still some of the same tried and true approaches to design make sense, but it's really important to adapt to the context that we're in.
Absolutely. And I know we're seeing a trend. I mean, certainly people desire to get back in person, but maybe they're shortening it a little bit, condensing it, or what we know, and I think we learned a lot during COVID, right? Of, well, we can do some things really effectively virtually, but not everything. But we need to use that time where we are on site, if we're in person, very wisely, because that time is at a premium. And so I think we're seeing that blend where, oh, let's make sure we focus it in on a couple of activities, or maybe we're not having one every year. So when we do get together, it's even more important. So we'll talk about that and some of the trade-offs, the different ways to deliver. But I wanted to start just by sharing a little bit of research that SBI has done. And just by way of background, for those of you who have been following SRG for a while, in July, we became part of SBI, so SBI Growth. And with that, have access to the consulting and research that SBI provides, as well as the advisory services. And it's really allowed us to link our training to the specific trends and research that's coming out, every quarter as we're looking at this. So I wanted to just share a couple of areas. One was a CEO assessment, and this was last updated the end of Q2, and we'll have additional information. We're updating it Q3 and Q4. And what this first chart looked at was in terms of demand indicators. Do we see, and this was from CEOs, do we see the economy slowing? Is it consistent? Is it accelerating? And if you look at the dark bar, that was in Q2 of 2022. So if we look at that, going back a year and a half, pretty strong confidence that things were accelerating. And if we remember back that far, we were, still coming out of COVID and things were growing. There was a lot of optimism. And if you look at that compared to the light blue, which is Q1 of 2023, the percentage of that think things are accelerating is actually quite a bit less, down to 27%, or maybe things are going to stay the same, or a higher percentage think that maybe things are slowing. And I think we've continued to see that. One of the overarching themes I'm hearing is, what we do know is there's uncertainty. So there's a lot of uncertainty going into next year. And I think the other thing, when we look at strategic focus on, are we really preparing for a recession, or are we preparing for recovery? How are we spending our dollars? Is a pretty strong focus in the middle. So we're not really sure, and a smaller percentage that's saying yes, we're gung ho, but more than almost 60% are saying well, we're kind of in the middle, focusing on recession readiness or recovery readiness. To me, what that says is there is just some reluctance, and that means our clients are reluctant to spend money. We're not really sure what to do. Why are we covering this? Well, we want to talk about why we need to leverage the SKO as a way of getting ahead of this, right? And following these trends. I guess, Sam, is this consistent with kind of what you're hearing from your clients and you're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, it sure is, Ray. It's spot on. I mean, a number of different anecdotes line up to this. We've lost count of the number of customers and partners that are reorganizing, that have had some targeted layoffs. We hear consistently pipelines are growing, but decisions are stalling and delaying. So yeah, this really does fit with what we've been seeing from our corner of the world.
Yeah, well, I don't want to spend too much time and happy to have a follow up or share the research if people are interested. But the other thing coming out of this is we think about seller productivity. And again, we're talking specifically about sales kickoff and sales teams here is, there is this challenge with selling these days. So when we looked across a number of organizations, deal size seems to be flat or shrinking. So more than 2/3 of the respondents said, "Yep, they're about the same, or they're actually getting smaller." Deal velocity, and this is very consistent, and you just hit on it, Sam. It's flat or slowing. So guess what, sales teams? It really is harder and taking longer to close deals. It doesn't just feel that way, but that's what the data is telling us across multiple different clients. And when we think about seller productivity, we want to be doing more with less. That was a big mantra over the last couple of years. But I think what we're seeing is, at least from a CEO perspective, they're seeing no change, or maybe even productivity has gone down. And especially, we onboarded a ton of new people. Maybe they didn't get the training and onboarding they needed. For a while, they were taking orders and things were busy, and now they have to actually sell, and they have to go prospect at higher levels. And so it can become more challenging. And I think, that's again why we need to make sure we get ahead of that when we're talking at the SKO about what we do going into that. Yeah, so Suzanne asked about using this data as a takeaway. And again, we're happy to share, and Alonzo, we can follow up to share that going forward. Yeah, and Bob asked about speed of marketplace sales, where reps are not involved, and this was B2B transactions and didn't specifically break that out. So it is an interesting question, and whether that's the same, growing, or shrinking. I'm not sure, and I'm sure Bob has an opinion. But let's continue on. The reason we wanted to cover this is just the backdrop that yes, in fact, things have gotten more challenging. And when we think about on the left-hand side, our sellers, right? They have more information, they have more options. There are, in fact, more people involved, and we know that kind of increases every year, but especially now, more likely to have a CFO involved, more likely to have a buying committee with multiple stakeholders, making that even more challenging, and we need to personalize our messages to all of them. On the right-hand side, we know that there's greater scrutiny on the margin, on the deal, size and pricing, on the go-to-market complexity, and as I was mentioning, kind of this resignation hangover. I don't know how else to term it, but that we're kind of recovering from that, where a lot of people moved and came on board, and now we're really trying to get them up to speed and productive at a level. So in the middle is this idea that the customers are risk adverse, they're slower to make decisions, especially large purchases, and there's even purchase regret. So it's harder to activate that once you get the commitment, but then it's like, well, but we're not ready, or we don't have time, or the bandwidth. So again, Sam, I know we chatted about this as well, but how do you see this affecting, some of your clients and some of the decisions they're making?
Yeah, it's a doing more with less. It's a hey, we're gonna pause on these strategies or these purchase decisions and optimize what we have. Sometimes we're hearing that among customers, but I think ultimately it's that margin focus. It's that focus on productivity. It's that focus on efficiency. Is just is being driven by CFO, CEO of most organizations, and is showing up in the sales cycle for sure.
Yeah, and I think what that tells me is our sales teams need to be even better, right? I mean, we do need to align with the way our customers buy. We need to be more prepared. We need to leverage all the resources we have, because things, in fact, have gotten more challenging. And the days of, taking orders or booking big deals and hitting your quota halfway through the year, maybe that's behind us for a little while. So, or if that even was the case. So, I'd love to get some input from the group here. And just as we're going to transition and start talking about SKOs, this is always interesting to hear. And I'm sure the answer is, well, it's multiple, but I'd love to have people capture in the chat, what's your goal for your next sales kickoff? What's the overarching priority? What are you trying to accomplish as you're putting together the agenda for your SKO? And if you could, just go ahead and chat in. Love to hear, just at a high level, what people are thinking. And we can see what the group has to see here, Sam has to say.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing what perspectives are out there with this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, I'll see, and it'll be interesting to see if we get similar thoughts from the group. But the idea of productivity, and we went from maybe a do more with less for a period of time. It's like, hey, we are going to cut budgets, or at least we're going to limit budgets, but we need everybody to lean in and do more. And maybe we've gotten the extra expense out, right? We've driven that out. Now we need to do more. We can't necessarily spend less, but we need to get more productivity out of those that we have, and we need to invest for growth going forward, because we can't afford to have another couple years of down or flat growth. So we're seeing some options here, or some thoughts. So Stefani mentioned new messaging, new product alignment. Terry, I love the comment, first time remote since COVID. So a chance for camaraderie, to celebrate the wins and learning. And I think that, again, when we think about the best use of being in person, is we need to have those connections, and we really need to create that culture as part of that. Tracy mentioned pumping them up and providing them with some tactics to uncover the why act now and why us, which I love. So how do we get our sales teams to help the customers make that decision as well? What else are you seeing here, Sam?
Well, I love that comment from Tracy, because it really is that activation in the current environment, which is so critical. It's talking to customers about why they should move, why they should have the courage or the business case to take back to their organization to say, yeah, it really is time to move. We need to do this. We need to make this investment. So I think that really captures our zeitgeist right now. The other one too is Suzanne just said in 2 letters, AI.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Man, oh man, omnipresent everywhere. So that can mean so many applications in different industries, but that is a massive theme right now in every industry.
Yeah, and how do we enable the team to take advantage of it without doing damage or doing harm? But really, as I've looked at that, it's how do we use it to make better reps, right? Better sales professionals. How do we use it to improve the profession, not just automate or speed things up or create more spam? Nobody needs that. But how do we use it to make better sales conversations and improve the sales process? So love that. Sarah says she's working on new sales methodologies. I think all of these things are really valuable, and they really feed into kind of our next thought, which is, well, how do we pull this together and use that time? And even I think Suzanne also mentioned role plays and practice. So using that time for a capstone or an exercise where we can get feedback from our peers versus being lectured to for 8 hours, right? Which no salespeople ever prioritized or said that that's what they wanted. So that's great. Any other takeaways before we move on here, Sam?
No, I just like how, so many great thoughts here that the group has generated. Love what Bob says here, kind of summarizing the true value of the in-person, the culture, the team building, the cross-organizational interactions. That's a great one to cap out on.
Yeah, because that's really hard to do virtually. There's some great things we can do in a collaborative platform, but there's nothing like being there and working together and rolling our sleeves up. So, we've captured some of these over the years, but the idea of igniting, to be a driven, unified team, kind of getting everybody together, getting that team cohesion, as many people mentioned, working together, launching new sales tactics, clarifying and sharing the vision and making sure that's trickling down, or new key initiatives. And I think, the group hit on all of this, not surprising. But I think the question we want to ask is, well, then how are you going to measure that? How do you really measure whether your SKO is successful? And if we're kind of getting a return on the investment, maybe it's not literally, but at least are we getting the type of outcomes that we're looking for? So let's take one more chat from the group here, and then we'll get into some samples. But love to understand, how are people measuring? Is it just satisfaction levels, smile sheets, degree of networking, or how good the awards party was? How are you measuring the success? Yeah, and Alonzo just chatted that in, so it kind of break this up. I think Terry already responded, doing a net promoter survey. But what are other people using to really see if it's a win or not?
Learning validation. Great. Revenue
Yeah, I love
increase.
Tracy's comment, that sales leaders, thinking about certification. So are they completing something? But that's also just a means to an end, right? Are we getting a revenue increase? Ultimately, are we getting that bump that we're looking for?
Yeah.
That's great. Feedback, quotes, activities, and more sales. Yeah, so having those benchmarks, I think, is important. Bob mentions that's $100,000. Bob, I'd say it's probably more like $1 million question, right? It's written off as cost of sales, but what does that really mean? And I think when we're talking about, well, are we trying to learn? Are we trying to network? Are we trying to launch a new program? What is it that we're going to measure, and over what period of time? Because doing a smile sheet on Friday at the end of a week-long SKO is one, it's only a temporary measure, and it really doesn't say what we're getting out of it. And what we want to talk about is, well, what happens over the next 3 months and the rest of the year, and how do we pull that through? So as Sarah mentioned, the post SKO work here is absolutely critical, and that's what we're going to get into next. All right, so let's. I appreciate the audience, really active, and appreciate all the comments coming in. So we're thinking about, did the SKO build camaraderie? If we're pushing information or building skills, are they able to apply it? And so I'd love that. Are there real examples we can point to? Maybe we have them do a capstone or a role play, or maybe they have to submit it in a platform. Is there a way that we can see that they're applying those skills so they don't go away and put the new playbook on the shelf and never think about it again? Did you sustain the learning? So is there reinforcement and coaching built in, and did it improve productivity? And you spent a lot of dollars, people had fun, but what impact did you really do, or really have? And that's really the question we're trying to get to here. Okay, so let's continue on. And Sam, I'm going to let you drive here for a little bit while I drive the slides, but let you speak to some of the different types of ways you can structure an SKO, and specifically some emerging and really novel ways that I think you can blend this together. Can you talk us through? We've got in person, we've got other different models, but talk us through what in person looks like. And then as we think about, what are some of the limitations and what else can we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ray. So, the group here has already hit on some of the great things that an in-person SKO, or really any sales event or learning event, is good for. It's great for getting that alignment between the team and the company strategy. It's great for inspiration. There's really nothing quite like having the CEO or the chief revenue officer or a product leader get up on stage and tell the stories, explain how the differentiation, why to activate, why now, like was said in the chat. It's that inspiration and motivation. And then finally, probably the biggest one that comes to mind is the building the relationships between colleagues that are going to enable effective teamwork, and that teamwork is going to be so necessary for results. So those are the kinds of things that these in-person events are really great for. But on the next slide, there's some things that it's not so great for. We all know that pushing strategy information, pushing content, Ray, as you said, spending hours and hours on stage is not the same as enabling your team to execute the strategy. And let's be honest, mega events aren't optimal learning experiences. There's a number of challenges here. I mean, one we see consistently across our clients is there is this built-in temptation when you bring it together a large sales audience, to overschedule and overload. Every product manager wants their time on the stage. Every marketer wants their time on stage, and you are just diluting the overall effect. In fact, it gets worse the more content that's put out there. So that's one big challenge. Another is, as we said, lectures aren't learning. There's a limited opportunity to practice, build, and apply skills in the traditional sage on a stage approach. And then the final piece is people don't learn through a 1 day, 2 day in classroom kind of experience. People learn over time. The brain research is done. We understand people need that kind of scaffolding to understand concepts, to apply them to their work. They need reinforcement over time. They need to get back on the job and apply it in the flow of work. We know how we know how learning works. It's not you can't get it done in the big mega event. And finally, they're expensive and not scalable. There's your time, there's the executive time, there's the field time, the opportunity cost of the people out of the field, and there's of course all that direct expense. So if you're going to make that investment, you want to get the most out of it. And so that's really the opportunity. We'll flip limitations to opportunity, and talk about that. So
yeah,
what
absolutely. And Sam, just before we do that, I'll mention on the kind of traditional, hey, we're going to do some training as part of this. That's one where we often have to say no to that request, because if it's, we've got 2 days of programming and other events, and then we're going to tack 2 days of training on the end. Like, sorry, I don't think we're in the best position to be successful there, or to help you be successful. However, if we can flip that and do some work in advance and use that time for what it's precious and what it's a good use for, as several people said, small group sessions, a capstone, a role play, a hands-on application, fantastic. But trying to lecture for 2 days, after they've already been together, and not that all training is lecture, but I think we really need to rethink that. And so this idea of a blended approach, I think, is really intriguing. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah, sure. And this is just a simple way to think about it. There's many ways you could execute this, but it's the classic, flip the classroom. Imagine that the event is, use the model of a classroom. You can prepare this audience in advance to get the most out of it. You can welcome them. You can set expectations from senior leaders digitally. You can build some excitement by connecting peers with one another. Dare we say, have a little bit of fun, with people. And you can tee up the preparatory work. So you take that load off of that overscheduling problem, and maximize, get the most out of what's really valuable and unique of that in person. So then when people come together in person, you can get that face-to-face value, but you can also extend that digitally. You can have opportunities to have learners and sellers reflect on live sessions. You can amplify that in-person networking experience through digital networking. And you have the opportunity to practice skills, start practicing skills that you can continue to practice back on the job when you integrate this learning experience post event, building skills over time, and continuing that engagement with peers and learners and that collaboration over time. So there's just this digital thread that amplifies the value of the experience.
Yeah, and I think, and we have a lot of learning and development and sales enablement professionals in our audience today, as well as sales leaders. And I think everybody would nod in and go, "Well, yeah, we kind of knew, we should have communications beforehand, or we should have some follow up." I think the challenge is there's just such an overwhelming amount of information, especially at the beginning of the year, that we're pushing out. And then afterwards, everybody's burned out. They're going back to their book of business. They've got to catch up, and they kind of forget about it. And so, as you mentioned, that digital thread, unless there's a way to kind of practice, make that practical and implement that, I think it often gets lost. And for me, the light bulb really went on when we could say, wait, now we can track it. And there are lots of different platforms or ways you can do that, but we'll walk through an example here that allow you to see if people are engaged and if they're doing the work. And especially when you attach a badge to it and start thinking about digital credentials, now there's a way of seeing what percentage actually completed it. And so I think salespeople are really competitive, and it's something we've learned, working with Intrepid and working with the collaborative platform over the years, is they'll lean in on it if they know that there's a leaderboard and there's some recognition and it's a chance to compete with their peers. So let's use that framework, right, as we put this together. So let's jump into that. I'd love to have you share, some of the things you've seen, and maybe just walk us through some of those components as we're going through different examples here.
Yeah. So we just put together a little scenario here, and this is you're going to imagine yourself as the learner, as a salesperson, Susie or Steve Seller. So imagine you're an attendee at your company's upcoming SKO. We're going to call it Ignite 2024, and you've been welcomed to this. You've gotten a link through email introducing you to this and inviting you to this. And you come in, click on the link, and you see, this compelling homepage, simple, easy to navigate, reflecting your company's logos and branding and so on. And it's capturing your interest. You see a leaderboard, you see event schedule. You go ahead and click on the event schedule, and we'll go to the next page here. And it brings you to a page that is going to allow you to prepare for this SKO before you even get there. Let's imagine that this is a few weeks out. You click on an inspiring video from your chief revenue officer. You see a few product experts that are introduced, and you start to peruse the schedule. And you're like, wow, this has been really thoughtfully curated. They're not going to overload me. They're giving me just enough. They're really been thoughtful about the message here. And wow, what's this down here? I can introduce myself. What is that? So let's take a click at that. Let's take a look at the next page. And you have a fun little assignment to just introduce yourself to your fellow attendees at the event, to tell them about yourself, what project you're working on, have a little fun, upload a picture. So you start to kind of have some playfulness and fun and connecting with your peers as well. It could be more serious. You could have something around what the kinds of challenges you're facing and so on. So then let's fast forward to the event on the next page.
Yep. And just before we do that, I think, and we leverage this in our collaborative training as well, but you kind of think about, another chance to introduce yourself. But the idea of creating a real cohort and a connection, especially for the event, I think is really valuable. And oftentimes we're training teams globally where they've never met each other. And then all of a sudden they realize, they have the same challenges. And there are other issues that I should be talking about, and I should go reach out to this person and connect with them. Or, I love it then when it's like, let's meet up when we're on site because I want to talk to you about, and that's why they can share something personal or a hobby or something. So, maybe there are other HR systems that do that, but this is very specific to, in this case, the sales team and to that SKO. So that I think that's a very valuable use case.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. So you've got that pre-event, and then you fly in to the event. Let's say that you got a great night's rest before day one, and you wake up, come to breakfast, open up your tablet, and you see everything you need to see for day one. And day one happens to be, in this case, a keynote from the CEO talking about selling success in lean times, really an inspirational message. and immediately you have opportunities in a discussion to reflect on what your CEO has said. What does this mean for your accounts, your territory, your team? And right away, step one on building your personal selling plan. So we're going to make this super practical. This isn't theoretical. This isn't sage on the stage. It's like, let's take step one to putting your plan together.
Yep. And Sam, I'd like to just make a comment and clarify, because there was a question about what technology is this, and there are lots of different ways that you can obviously run your SKO. The caveat I'd make is we're not suggesting or selling an SKO software package, right? Or there's a lot that could do your online registration and it does all of the rest of the event here. What we're talking about here is the collaborative experience around those outcomes that we're trying to influence. So these particular screenshots are from Intrepid, so Sam's company, but just as an example of how you can pull this together, and you might leverage it, using Intrepid. There may be other platforms that you may want to use, but I will say again, this is separate from, this is a SKO package that we're promoting, or that people have on their phones that they may be using.
Yeah, so great question, Suzanne. This is our platform, and really this is any blended learning experience. Right. Can be designed this way, and I just really worked on kind of making this relevant for the SKO use case. Yeah. Right. So the peer-to-peer interactions, lots of opportunity to again, you're gonna have that live interaction at your table, in the getting the coffee and so on. But this gives you that other lens, other ability to connect. To have these threaded discussions could be on topics, on affinity groups, on role, on sessions, what have you. So a lot of power with that to amplify the experience. So then, you wrap up, you get on the plane, like Ray said, you come back. I think he said this earlier. You've got this, mountain of emails and Slacks you're trying to get through back on the job, and you're like, wow, okay, that was good, but I'm paying the price now. So you click back into your site, your Ignite site, and you see that, oh my gosh, this has been really, again, thoughtfully curated. All the content that I need to refer to from the sessions is right there. And there's this ability to continue building that sales plan, maybe framed as a challenge, that helps you connect it directly to your work. And we talk a lot about in the flow of work. That's what this is. It's helping you build that plan actually tied to your customers and your sales plans that you need to develop. And this extends the learning experience over time, which again, that's what's missing when we do these events. We somehow magically think that we're going to kind of microwave skills with people by bringing them together for a couple of days, and that's really not how it works. So we want to continue this learning experience over time.
Yeah, and to be able to have some data and metrics around that utilization, because again, they're doing it in the platform, I think is so valuable, because the number of sales leaders that have come back and said, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure if they're using this tool, or I'm not sure if they're actually putting the playbook into practice. And if we create, an activity, a mission, if you will, to have them do that, now we literally can come back and say, well, you know what, 80% of the people completed this successfully, in 90 days after the session, or whatever that's looking. And is it making a difference, right? So we can start to actually correlate the sales results accordingly. But yeah, do you want to talk about some of that real life skill application, Sam?
Yeah, you bet, Ray. So this is just one example of it, that idea of building your sales plan over time, through different activities. This is an actual example from Microsoft. They did a program called Business Strategy and Financial Acumen, and the whole idea here is they were trying to upskill the sellers to be able to sell cloud solutions to business buyers versus selling to technical buyers only. And so this is midway through the program, and they happen to be studying value chains, understanding the value chains of their customers, and the reason they're doing that is so that they can prescribe and recommend particular Microsoft solutions to the customer based on their understanding of the way the value chain works. So this particular customer had a retail value chain, and the assignment after they've gone through the lectures and listened to the experts is to map the value chain of your customer. So there's nothing like this in terms of application. Like, I understand customer X, how their value chain works, and based on that, I will make these following recommendations of what solutions to recommend. So again, that ruthless relevance, detailed application, skill building through practice, and then the opportunity to see what some of your other colleagues have done and go in, take a look, comment, like, or even connect with them offline. Again, that collaboration is built into this as well.
Yeah, and I think it really helps them. One, they get to see others work, right? They can go in, and depending on the security you've allowed, they can see everyone's assignments or within their particular pod. The other thing that we've found to be very effective is curating some of those examples. So when we do our application review and coaching sessions, and this is in all of our training programs when we're using the collaborative platform, is then we have a moderator who's pulling out some of those examples and say, well, let's look at Sam's example here. What do you like about it, and what can we do? And we're not calling attention to bad examples necessarily, but we're highlighting those and giving them some visibility. And also people know, oh, people are going to look at my work, so I probably should pay attention to it if I'm submitting this in front of my peers, so to speak. So anyway, I think for the idea, and we're working with several companies where we're either doing the training in advance and then they're coming to SKO and they're going to present, or they're going to do a capstone and then we follow up. That's a way to pull it through. Or in cases where we're kicking off at the SKO and we're activating a new playbook or a new sales process, and then we're going to use the platform as a way of having them apply that to real life examples, so that we can see that they actually know how to do it and that they're doing the work, so to speak. So I think it's a great way to see, if they're actually applying the concepts.
Yeah, and we get back to metrics too, Ray. This is interesting too. Is the way that in that particular program, the way that sales leadership was at Microsoft was identifying impact, and the metrics was account plans created, because they knew account plans through their exhaustive study was a leading indicator of sales success. So that was the metric that they were interested in. So applied learning through was really what they were looking for.
Yeah.
So, hey, look, to keep things fun, track progress, what salesperson doesn't like a little friendly competition? So leaderboard to track your points and badges is a great way to go. So, post event, you could check, you come back, you check in to see where you stand on the leaderboard. You see how you're stacking up against your cohort, what points you've gathered, what badges you've earned along the way, and what remains to be done to finalize and get your final badges and points. And this might give you that extra nudge to complete your work. So
when we do weekly training sessions, I'd say whether SKO related or not, we highlight this every week and celebrate the winners. And we've had clients that are doing separate spiffs or contests or things, but just the visibility. And I will say the most successful blended programs we've had using this approach is where the sales leaders are leaning in. And we've had examples where they're sending out the summary email every week and saying, hey, let's congratulate Vivian for knocking it out of the park and being at the top of the leaderboard in this example. So I think that's really effective as well, to kind of get that sponsorship and get the recognition as they go through, and encouraging others, hey, there's still time to catch up, right? But and in this case, it's every video, every mission, every assignment, if they're collaborating with others in the platform, so they're getting different point values for multiple different things that may be related to the program.
Yeah. So hopefully this scenario has given you some ideas about how a blended SKO can offer some really clear upside. And we'll just touch on a couple of these. But big concept is around the social. It provides not an alternative to, but another dimension for collaboration, in addition to the face-to-face, collaboration over time, and also some really directed collaboration tied to key concepts or content discussions about, using Gen AI for selling, a discussion about selling in difficult times and so on. Second concept, really key concept, learning over time, before, during, and after the event. Learning is a continuous process. Learning happens over time. That's how we build skills back on the job. So that's a really critical concept. Applying it to your real accounts, applying it directly to your work, advancing real work through learning, not making those two separate things, but one thing. And then continuing this experience year round and sustaining that momentum and impact is super critical. So the way I think about this is, if you're making this big investment of your time, your executive's time, the field's time, all the direct expense of the live learning, it's a small lift to think about how do you add the blended component to add like significant value beyond the 1, 2, 3 day live event. You're really extending and amplifying and increasing the value.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I think people don't maybe appreciate is that we can keep it alive year round. So often we lose momentum, and sometimes there's an activity like, oh, you've got to submit it, et cetera. But submit an assignment or something, but then we kind of forget about it. Versus having a way to go back and maybe we do a monthly roundtable, right, or a coaching session with the managers, but we can leverage and go back to the platform and say, okay, well, now we want you to update your account plan, or we want you to bring in another account to apply this to. So, I think there are lots of ways to keep it alive during and throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one client that comes to mind, a major manufacturer, had a cohort of learners who would come together live a couple times a year. And this really became the community and the red thread that connected them between. So it was the formal learning, but it really became kind of the collaboration that powered the cohort and built the connections over time. So it's not just content; it's also this connection of community.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you just summarize this as a case study, and I think we just have a couple of recap slides, and then we'll spend some time on questions here. But you want to talk through kind of the situation, solution, and the outcome here?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just catching up with a customer last week, and in preparation for this webinar, and she was a sales enablement leader for a digital marketing software company, and they had completed an acquisition in the fall of a couple of years ago, and they needed an SKO to align the teams. Really bring one company together. This was also during COVID, so in their case, they really had to adopt a blended strategy. So their SKO goals included unifying the business, delivering a deeply engaging experience. We were all talking Zoom fatigue and Zoom gloom back in the day, and also providing an opportunity for the sales team to practice some new skills, and particularly around pitches. Practicing pitching skills. So what was the solution? They designed a 3-week semi-synchronous experience, and all that means is that it's time released, time bound. Like and it concluded both self-paced components, like we saw on the slides, as well as live synchronous sessions and the video-based practice pitch assignments. From what my client told me, learning experience was, and we heard over the last couple of years, very well received, especially that place for learning to be that one place for the SKO and the real world experience. And we didn't really get into it here, but there's also the ability through the Intrepid platform to support the video practice, video pitch. It's a feature, right. So that's a component that can be useful during your use case. And I think the proof in the pudding was that they ran this multiple years, and the kind of like the Microsoft situation, they saw the video practice as a leading indicator for future success. So I think someone said earlier that validated skills, that's a great way to validate skills. I asked my customer, what lessons learned did she have from that? What would her advice be to you, knowing that I was going to have this conversation? And she said, look, focus on those specific skills you want the sellers to improve on. Let learners practice, building real world skills. Really make sure you make room for practice. Consider segmenting the learner experience by role. And this is interesting too. This gets to what Ray was saying about cohorts. it also gets to something around scale, because I would guess maybe some of you are in organizations where you're feeling cost pressures, and maybe you can't fly everyone into the SKO. You can't bring the sales engineers in. You can't bring the solution architects in. You can't bring marketing in. Well, if you have a digital solution as well, you could have a digital track for this as well, and you could still reach that in a scalable fashion. And then last but not least, and this was a learning, honestly, she said, yeah, we could have done a better job of this, was provide that continuous learning. Don't just make it about the event, or even in her case, like the 3-week event. She wishes they would have continued it beyond that. So just a couple of, real world example and some reflections.
No, and I think it's a great way to kind of pull that together. And, we were getting some questions about, well, what do we mean blended and how does this work? And I think we're using blended kind of in a general sense of, hey, there's a combination of asynchronous where they're doing some work on their own, or maybe they have to consume those videos, do an assignment, but then we're bringing them together live, and that may be live virtual or live in person, some combination of those. And so I think that's where, you can use that time wisely, and you can also get a benefit from, hey, you're not taking them out of the field for 40 hours, but they can do, some of that work on their own when they have time. And so there's a ability to scale that, I think, in a different capacity than having to have everybody in the room for the entire thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, we just wanted to share, and these are, I will say, quotes from just using a collaborative platform in general, not specific to SKO, but I think they highlight this idea that they get a chance to learn from others, right? That comes up and again. And that the activities have to do with customers you're working on, so that, in the flow of work or real life. So it's maybe you have a case study or a role play, but they're also doing it for a real live customer, and they feel like they're doing work that, we've had numerous times they come back and say, hey, this helped me close the deal, or we actually grew our pipeline as a result of this particular experience or this training we went through. So that's the kind of feedback we're looking for. Talk about what worked and what didn't work. So, sharing with each other. We have a very active discussion board when we run these. So, and ask the expert and kind of ask the colleague, so they can post a question about, well, wait, how are you using AI in this scenario? Or what do you do when you get an objection that has to do with X, Y, and Z? So I think they get a chance to have those questions answered, kind of by their peers and in real time. And the leaders, getting the leaders involved. And as this one example said, those who went through the program are now leaders, so they were able to upskill themselves, and they were able to take the feedback from others and use it in the very next meeting. So use it to advance a deal, which makes salespeople feel like, oh wait, this was valuable. If it helps them close business, that's a win for sure. So yeah, I think, these are some of the kind of feedback. I'm sure you've heard some of the similar themes and others as well. Sam, anything else you'd add to this?
No, this is great, and just love the verbatims from the learners. It's one thing to hear from the buyer, but there's nothing like what the learners have to say and validating the power of the experience.
Yep. And Suzanne brought up a question about whether you're grouping by tenure or by role. And I think that's always challenging, because people are coming from a very different place. And unless you've done a full talent assessment, which is also a really valid approach if you can do that and get an idea of where their skills are, and work with their managers to develop an individual training plan or an IDP development plan, you don't know. But I think it's one of the reasons, and we've had many times where we've had the most senior sellers. One of our clients calls them global black belts, right? So we've had global black belts in the same program as more junior reps, but they're able to share their experiences and learn from each other. And if you empower those who are more senior to share those examples, now you're really getting that cross-pollination. So, lots of different ways we can think about that. But I think that's a good way to blend the program as well.
Yeah. And if you have that application and collaboration and connections, like you said, Ray, you're allowing the more junior career folks to learn from the senior career, but you're still challenging the more experienced folks to apply to their accounts. The alternative is, I mean, if you think of like asynchronous e-learning modules that are completely irrelevant to them,
Mm,
that's not a good solution. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are falling down right now is they'll do their skill assessment, and then they'll just point people to a library of content, and it's like, whoa, it's not differentiated, it's not personalized for them. So this, when you have the opportunity to have real world assignments, that's immediately personalized for every learner.
absolutely. And yeah, if they feel like they're working on their own stuff and maybe they can share, but you're right. And typically salespeople don't have a long attention span for, you give them 4 hours of e-learning to do. And I will say your completion rates aren't going to be quite as desirable as some of what we've seen here. So just a few key takeaways, and then we'll turn it back over to Alonzo and see if there are other questions. But we want to harness the SKO, and we said why. Well, it's really important going into next year because there is uncertainty. We need to continue to empower and improve the productivity of the sales team, and to address some of those unique challenges, like deals are more complex and more people are involved. So we have to get behind that, and SKO is a great way to do that. But let's think about how we kickstart it beforehand, how we amplify it, during the live event, and then how we pull that through afterwards and make it a continuous learning and a continuous experience, even afterwards, so that we're getting that ongoing reinforcement and training and coaching from the manager team. Anything else you'd add to this as well, Sam? I mean, we covered a lot of ground here, but what else would you say?
No, I think this is really it. It just unlocks so much more value. And one of the things that you and I have talked about a lot, Ray, over the years is making the highest best use of your experts, right? I mean, it's going to be in that motivation, the inspiration, the connection with the team. It's not in just delivering rote content. So there are other ways to do that. There are other ways to really make sure that you're focused on the highest best use of people's time during the live event, and making use of pre-work, making use of post-work, and then just extending and amplifying the content, the collaboration, and the practice digitally. It just unlocks a whole another level of value, on top of some significant investments that any organization is going to make for a live event.